Hello there, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for one of our Fortune 500 focused webinars here. I'm Sam, and I moderate these weekly webinars. In just a second, we're going to be joined by Patrick Ray, one of our financial advisors, and he is going to be covering some topics related to 401k for Fortune 500 employees. I apologize, we are going to keep this one short. We will not be answering any questions after the presentation, but I still encourage you to ask away if you have them. I promise I will be fielding these to a financial advisor to get in contact with you after the presentation. They will either email or call you and try to answer those for you over the phone or through an email, as I mentioned. And quickly, I want to just remind you, we are not affiliated nor endorsed whatsoever by any specific company. We are a completely independent group of financial advisors here, so please keep that in mind as you're listening along. And you may see some pop-ups if you're on Quick Meeting. You may see some pop-ups to our calendar as well as our YouTube and some other various resources. If you're on YouTube, I will be moderating and putting these into the chat. You can click directly on those links and take advantage of all of those resources. So I encourage you to do so. And without further ado, let's get into it with Patrick Ray.
Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us. My name is Patrick Ray, and I'm one of the senior advisors here with the Retirement Group. And as it turns out, today we're here to talk about retirement planning, and specifically the things among many, to consider when you transition from being an employee to being a retiree. And this happens to be one of the most stressful events that individuals as a whole will deal with in their lifetimes. And so we want to make that process and that transition as seamless as possible. And one of the many ways to do that is to not only participate in these webinars that we do and educational workshops and try to learn as much as you can, but it's also to prepare. And the biggest challenge for many of the folks that we talk to is the process of getting started and actually starting the process to prepare. And so right now, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you'll have to consider. For example, the rollover options that you have for the capital that you've saved and worked an entire lifetime to accumulate that may be held currently in your 401k. And for some of you that have aspects of being able to take a lump sum from the pension plan. So these are rollover options. And so what you would want to consider is moving the money into an IRA, which is an individual retirement account. That is a non-taxable transition when you pick it up from one entity and move it into another, which we do at Charles Schwab, by the way. And in doing so, it gives you the ability to continue to enjoy tax-deferred growth, but it has a more wide range of investment choices and flexibility. And control is quite a bit more intimate with respect to having an IRA, so you get to dictate where the funds come from when you need income, what to sell, what to buy, and of course with strategic help from environments or firms like ours, we can help you put a plan together that's consistent with all of the things that are important that you would want to consider. Some of you inside your 401ks actually have after-tax money, or you even have earmarked money to go into the Roth 401k, which of course monies would be separate from the traditional IRA. And so remember, as a whole, traditional IRA money has never cycled through the tax system before, and so you need to consider when you remove those funds that that's taxable income to your household when you do so. And there's challenges in doing that if you do or try to do that prior to age 59 and a half, which we'll talk a little bit about here later. And then on the Roth side, it enjoys tax-free growth, right? You get to put the money in an environment where it continues to grow for your lifetime tax-free. And those funds are also not subject to the standard minimum distribution rules that apply to a regular IRA. So rollover options are something that we need to consider when we're thinking about transitioning into retirement. But before we get to those decisions, something that might be a bigger priority, certainly from a concern perspective for many of the folks that we see, which is how or what they can expect to live on as far as an amount and what they're comfortable taking out versus what they've saved and how that compares to what they think they need. And in many cases, what they think they need is far and above what they're even normally accustomed to spending. And so one of the benefits of going through a budgeting process, while tedious, And many folks don't do that because as we were in our working years, it seems like time goes and we just deal with the money comes in, you get paid every 2 weeks or so, and you just kind of deal with the ramifications of life in general. But we have to get out of that habit when we transition into retirement because it's a structured environment where we don't have any new capital coming in, and what you have coming in is going to likely come from the sources that you've worked and saved an entire lifetime to accumulate. So budget is crucial to helping understand the ramifications of what is needed for you to basically be comfortable in and during retirement. So let's talk a little bit about the various income producing options that you'll have if you decide to transition your money into an IRA. There are annuities there are many versions of this particular type of investment that you could potentially consider. You've got things like dividend paying stocks, interest from fixed income investments like CDs and treasury bills and other types of corporate bonds. You have portfolio diversification, which is part of our main responsibility when we work to manage the lifetime of funds that you've accumulated and making sure that those are diversified to the extent that you wish them to be and that you're comfortable with. And then we can also talk a little bit about managed payout from things like mutual funds, as it turns out. So let's talk a little bit about the annuity options. And annuities are a way to provide you a fixed stream of income, and typically they coincide with retirees. And they are similar to a pension. So we can step back for a second and think in terms of, for those of you who have a pension and you're considering whether you should take the annuity option or whether you should take the lump sum option, my first recommendation to you is to run a cash flow analysis to determine the difference of what that looks like during your lifetime between the two. And then if you further assume that the lump sum is the best option, but you like the idea of structured payments, as it turns out, then you could consider many of the annuity options that are out there. And there are things like immediate annuities, which pay you an immediate income the minute you defer or deposit the funds into the annuity itself. You have deferred vehicles where maybe there's some upside in some of the options that you have on indexed versions or variable versions. Both of which are either fixed or variable as options that you can choose to where the money gets invested. And then part of the challenge with the annuity options is sometimes they don't have fixtures or abilities to pay those funds to either spouses or, more importantly, to children or grandchildren, if that's important to you. So it's tough to get money passed on to the additional generations of your family. So there's a lot of challenges with this particular option that need to be considered for sure. But certainly we could talk about the flexibility that comes with having the money in your own camp and into your own accounts, as opposed to taking an annuity option as an example from a pension plan in the event that you choose to do that. So on the single premium immediate deferred annuities, these are secured with payments that are guaranteed for monthly versions. You can actually take these on a quarterly or a semi-annually or an annual basis, but those are basically guaranteed for life. And some of the downfalls are that the annuity means that you lose control of the funds. So when you buy an immediate annuity, think in terms of you're taking a pool of money and giving it to an insurance carrier, which they in turn calculate a life expectancy with some other calculations and interest rates to determine how much you get per month. And if you happen to die or suffer an untimely death prior to your life expectancy, the funds in an immediate pay annuity get kept at the insurance company as opposed to being sent or given to your spouse or to your children or grandchildren. So it limits the potential of passing those funds on to your heirs. And another challenge with some of the single premium immediate or deferred annuities are the adjustments with cost of living or inflation. And so, as you know, in many cases, when you take an annuity from the company that you work for, that annuity stays stagnant for your lifetime. And so it's tough to continue to keep up with the cost of living adjustments 10, 15, 20 years into retirement if you don't have a inflation buffer or an interest that accounts for inflationary concerns where we're all going to deal with at some point in time in the future. So on the fixed indexed side or the variable side, both could provide an income stream if you attach an income rider to these things. Some of them don't have that, so that's another concern that you might want to consider. But fixed annuities provide some downside protection, which often are talked about when you have volatility in the market. So you might see that some of the commercials that you see on TV or hear on the radio often they're advocated when the markets are in flux or there's some uncertainty going on with what's happening overseas or in interest rate environments or in this particular case an election type year, that you might consider adding monies to a fixed account or something like this where it gives you some downside protection that maybe an ordinary stock does not give you. But typically they have a smaller upside, and sometimes there's a cost to that. So you want to be cognizant of what that may represent or how that works to the overall deposit that you could consider. And on the variable side, there's an access to an investment portfolio that are structured and managed by the actual fund managers that the annuity carriers hire, and many of those are different from firm to firm. And so there is potential growth upside that you would get in those versus a fixed income type annuity. But it also adds more risk to the overall portfolio. So dependent on your tolerance for risk and your financial goals and your investment objectives, some or maybe none of these might actually apply to what might be important to consider with respect to your overall portfolios. So we could talk a little bit about the interest and dividend type investing, which typically comes from stock type dividends that come from individual stocks, or interest on bonds and CDs and money market accounts and things of that nature. And basically what we're talking about is it allows some flexibility for some consistent income that you receive on a regular basis without needing to sell any of your investments. Now, in a perfect world, you would try to map out what it is that you need to live off of on a monthly basis versus how much income and dividend and interest is being paid into your portfolio. And if those two things align, often people consider the fact that they're living off of interest only, which in some cases in this scenario would actually be the case. But of course, your purchasing power is still a ramification of this thought process. So in other words, the ability for you to buy as much for the $5,000 a month, as an example, you're getting in 15 years is not the same as it is today. So the challenges, of course, with bonds and yield, you have inflation risk, and you have credit risk, and you have interest rate risk. And then, of course, the volatility of the actual income payments themselves. Some of them are more attractive if you buy what they call callable notes on structured fixed income investments that you will run the risk of if the interest rates go down during the window of time that you own them. The financial institution has the right to pay back your loan that you've given them and pay back the money before the actual bond or fixed income investment matures. And so that's a consideration for sure among many. And of course, dividends are not guaranteed, and that's a potential concern for some folks that have a need for a certain amount of money each and every month, and they can't rely on the inconsistency of dividend payments because those fluctuate and change on a regular basis. And so interest and dividend income is also taxable. Well, for those of you who are dealing with IRAs, this is a given because no matter what interest and dividends you earn on the investments that you have, the taxable nature of it is relevant to what you can take out and live off of going forward. So total return investment focuses more on optimization and strategies that come from diversifying the actual funds in different types of stocks and different types of bonds and potential fixed income type investments. And so a retiree would consider constructing a portfolio of these mix of investments and different types of investments that have different timelines and they have different upsides and downside risks that will give you more flexibility with respect to what you can withdraw. And as long as we're trying to also correlate that with the need that you have for income, you should be online and in cases of trying to meet your overall goals at a 3 to 5 to 10 to 15 year time window, as it turns out. So total return investment is something that certainly could be considered as to all of these things that we're referring to. And then I mentioned earlier about managed fund payouts from mutual funds, which are a basket of stocks or bonds or fixed income type investments that would provide you a regular income from either interest and or dividends. But the downfall to that is moving them, if they're in taxable accounts, could lead to tax considerations that might not be in your best interest to move or to change. And so the tax efficiency becomes an issue in some cases. But it also has some illiquid nature to it, so that the ability for you to time when to sell those, as it turns out, while the market's open, as an example, you have to wait till the end of the day from a trading perspective to liquidate a mutual fund, and so that may be a concern that we could consider that doesn't equate to what your overall goals and your objectives are. But typically, these work well in retirement accounts, and that's where the majority of the retirement responsibility we have for our folks that come to see us for help. And so if you have IRAs, and that equates to allocating money because of the tolerance for risk that you and your family have by using mutual funds, this could be a good alternative to where to place some of your proceeds. So let's look at an example real quick as to how this would work from a cash flow perspective. And so if you have a 65-year-old couple who has a need for $6,000 a month in income, right? And the combined Social Security between the two as a couple is $3,000 a month. So we have a shortfall. We have a shortfall to make up, which is $3,000. It's every month. This person needs $6,000. They have $3,000 coming in. We need to make up the difference. And they don't want to work anymore to make up that difference. And so they're going to rely on their $1 million investment portfolio to produce the $3,000 a month. And so the question then becomes, how can the $1 million IRA be used to meet this particular gap, in this case, $3,000. And so what it looks like is a breakdown of having monies potentially to consider in an immediate pay annuity, as it turns out, because this particular example would lean towards someone who is incredibly risk averse, and they're looking for safety, and they're looking for a projected and defined income that they can rely on a given basis every single month for the rest of their life. They would want to consider a strategy something similar to this, where they would earmark money to go into an immediate annuity, which in this case would provide them $2,000 a month. And then the interest from putting money in a money market account that they would draw down from at $1,000 a month, which basically buys them about 3.5 years or so of timing where they could consider what to do to replace that after the remaining $600,000 gets invested. So from time to time, we would need to review and analyze how the structure of the money market account is holding up with respect to what's being removed, because let's face it, things come up, and the assumption in this particular scenario is you're taking out $3,000 a month, but that didn't account for the roof that needed to be replaced, or the car that broke down, or some medical bills that came up that you needed a one-time disbursement for. And so this is a constant monitoring of our situation to make sure that we're giving the best advice to this person in this particular case that has this $1 million, that has that $3,000 shortfall. So I mentioned earlier with respect to the money that's in a 401k or an IRA or in your pension as you decide to take the lump sum, which is when you take money from that bucket of IRA funds, it's taxable income to you. And so the pre-tax contributions that have been in accumulation and that are in there are growing on a tax-deferred basis, right? So that's pretty standard, and that's a fairly general thought process and how it works in a big picture of things. However, the concern is if you're in your early to mid 50s and you're considering retiring, as an example. Now, we have a special workshop that talks about the premature distribution strategies that are available that you can use through your 401k and through IRAs that I would encourage you to check out if you haven't already done that, because the 10% penalty would be applying to individuals who just decide to take money from their IRAs and they're not yet 59 and a half. So the after-tax contributions, though, of course, in these qualified funds, and as an example, if you have after-tax money in your 401k, can be moved to a Roth IRA so that that money continues to grow tax-free for the rest of your life, which also applies to your Roth 401ks in the event that you had a Roth 401k. This comes up later in your retirement for the most of you, which is the requirement of when the IRS says, regardless of your need for money, you must start taking money out of your IRAs to effectively cycle through the tax system. And for those of you who were born prior to 1959, that is a 73-year-old time frame. And so that rule has changed a few times in the most recent few years. It used to be 70 and a half, and then they moved that rule to 72. And then they changed it to 73, with a caveat that if you were born after 1960, your technical time is age 75. So, of course, it gives us some longer time to continue to enjoy tax deferral in our IRAs. But you can't withdraw more. You can withdraw more than they require to you, but you can't withdraw less. So when you get to minimum distribution age, it's incredibly important that you have a plan that makes and ensures that you follow the IRS guidelines, because this is a significantly penalized event in the event that you do not do this correctly. And so we take care of this for our clients because this is a big deal. But there's no excuse for you as a taxpayer that can say even to the IRS, well, my financial advisor or my financial firm didn't tell me that I was required to take these monies out. So it's your responsibility as a taxpayer. And the minimum distribution strategy is certainly one that needs to be considered in the overall scheme of your retirement planning. So I mentioned at the beginning that many of the folks that we talk to don't have a written financial plan. They don't have a plan. They basically are considering retiring, and all of a sudden now they want to start considering what to do. They think about how to plan for it, what's next, and that kind of thing. And we know statistically that 74% of the people over the age of 50 do not have a written financial plan. And there's really no excuse for that, because we do this as a way to share our services with people who would be interested in partnering with a firm that looks for some help. And so you might ask yourself, well, if I choose to do that, why would I consider doing business with the Retirement Group? And there's a number of reasons for that. We have a ton of experience on the team. I personally have been in the business for well over 20 years now, and we have offices all across the country that can help you. So there's many of the advisors on the team with me that can address your questions and concerns and help you build a plan that's consistent with what's important to you, so that you have some comfort in knowing the transition of moving from a retiree into from an employee into a retirement status is as comfortable as it can be for you. And so we have some intimate knowledge of a lot of retirement plans that we work strategically with for our folks. And as I mentioned, the cash flow analysis, which is, if you haven't already done that, something you should do. So if you want, you're welcome to schedule a meeting, and you can do that with us or any of my team members in a number of ways. You can email us at info@theretirementgroup.com. You can call our 800 number, which is 800-900-5867. You can take a picture of the QR code to the left, and it will get you access to a calendar where you can choose a time that works best for you and your family. Or in the event that you haven't already done so, following us on our LinkedIn page would also indicate a way for us, for you to get in contact with us. And we also have consistent content that comes out on our LinkedIn page that I would encourage you to check out if you're not already doing so. And so with that, what I'd like to do is just leave you with the general thought process of, if you haven't had a plan, if you hadn't made time to do a plan, it's important that you start. And the sooner that you start, the better prepared that you'll be to transition into retirement. And so we're here to help you. We're delighted to spend some time with you if you're willing to spend some time with us. And so we'll look forward to you reaching out to us when you're free and when you have some time to put some effort into this, and we're delighted to help you. So with that, we'll let you go for the afternoon. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully you found value in what we had to talk about today. Take care.